Welcome to Restaurant Deal Making Exposed, the only show that equips you with everything you need to know about restaurant transactions. In this show, we tell you all about how to make the sale or purchase of your restaurant not just possible, but successful. Now here are your hosts, ex-restaurateurs and seasoned brokers, Patrick Toda and Andy Mirabel.
Welcome back to another episode of Restaurant Deal Making Exposed. I am Andy. I'm here with my partner, Patrick. Today's episode, What Virgin Buyers Want to Know, Part 1. There are many stigmas and labels society put on virgins. However, purity and innocence are not often traits that a veteran seller or landlord want in a buyer or a new tenant. Being a virgin buyer can often put you at the bottom of the buyer list for many reasons. So today we'll discuss what first-time buyers should know, as well as things they can do to stand out in the crowded pool of buyers. Today we have guest Drew Butler, the owner and operator of Market Pizza by Drew Butler in Culver City. Drew received his BS from Syracuse University, where he was on scholarship for Men's Crew. He later began his career as an actor in Los Angeles in 1993. He's appeared in over 60 national commercials, including Super Bowl spots, commercials for Audi and Budweiser, and much more. Drew is a rarity in the pizza world, as his market chose him. While fundraising in a neighborhood for his son's high school football team, several neighbors mentioned that Jackson Market had a pizza oven in back that no one was using. The market had lost a couple of chefs, and then COVID happened, and the community nominated Drew as their new neighborhood pizzaiolo. And thus, Market Pizza by Drew Butler was born in 2022. So, as you can see, we have a wonderful guest today, Drew Butler. And Patrick, I got to start asking you a question, though, okay? When did you lose your virginity, Patrick? And no, I'm not talking about anything that's inappropriate here. When was the first time you purchased your own brick and mortar? You know, what stage in life did that happen when you made that big step to buy your own business and location?
Yeah. Although I had been in the restaurant industry my entire life from, when I was a young kid, getting dragged to work by my dad at his, grocery store and deli and all the other family businesses along the way. My first purchase as a virgin buyer was in 2009. And this was with one of the largest landlords in San Francisco, Boston.
You must have looked like small beans to him then, because we're talking about the Embarcadero Towers, right? Or one Embarcadero?
We are, and my experience went a long way because I did not have much financials behind me, but I had great experience. And so God bless them. They gave this little kid a shot, so yeah.
Yeah. I dealt with a pretty heavy hitter on my first go around too, but we've talked about that on other episodes. So please, Patrick, take it away and get this guest introduced.
Yeah, Drew, thank you for joining us. I know that we connected on LinkedIn like some time ago, and you had some really detailed questions for me. So it's kind of interesting that we're here on the podcast together. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's really an honor to be here. I do have a lot of respect for what you both do, the value you provide in the restaurant space, especially to someone that's newer. I mean, I'm a sponge when it comes to the business side of things. I like to look at it as my personal area of expertise is the pizza business. And I know a lot about pizza, but I know a lot less about business. So to build up those weaknesses, I, rely heavily on, books and podcasts and trade magazines and going to Pizza Expo. 4 years later now, I feel like I'm kind of now out of not knowing a whole lot. And now I probably know just enough to be dangerous. I'm just about to get in some trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what I reached out to Andy about to, write an offer for my first brick and mortar. And, I certainly have a lot of questions moving forward. And so that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, and you got your acting legs to fall back on too there, right, Drew?
Yeah.
Just in case you swing too big.
I find that, all of our experience, gets us to where we're at. And, I have done a little bit of, speaking about my getting into the pizza business. And part of it is, what is my background? I have the acting background, which I feel like is really prepared me for the customer service side of things. I don't have a customer service background. I have much more of a technical abilities type of background. So when it comes to acting the part of a jovial business owner that engages in customers, that skill set certainly pays dividends.
Yeah, Drew, I would say that, having a customer service background, I think customer service comes naturally. I don't think you can teach that. And so you either have it or you don't. And I would assume that you probably do. And so you don't need a ton of experience. If you know how to treat people like in your everyday life, I think that you can probably be really good at customer service.
Yeah, I have one thing to say about that. My philosophy is one, great pizza amazing customer service, but where that focus from customer service came from was on the other side of the counter.
Yeah.
Right. I'm
exactly.
a foodie type of guy. And when I go to a restaurant, I expect certain things. And then I found myself behind the counter and I'm like, well, either you're going to live up to all the things you already know and appreciate,
Exactly.
or you're just going to be a fraud. So I really try to deliver that. My wife and I, she's from a restaurant background. Her family owned a restaurant. And so she's an operations girl. And we can't help but sit down in a restaurant. Last night we were looking in the open kitchen of a place that we went and we were like, well, that's what they're showing us, right? Like they should be showing us something different because that doesn't look like anybody should be looking at it. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We're all in that boat with you.
Yeah. So it's good to have someone here who's a fan because Andy keeps telling me that we don't have any fans. So this proves you wrong, Andy.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So let's get into it here a little bit. What are some of your largest concerns as a first-time buyer that you want to share with us and share with the podcast?
Yeah. The first question, which is, what are some do's and don'ts when writing an offer?
What are some do's and don'ts when writing an offer? Okay. Andy, you want to?
Yeah, I think there's some real basics to that. I think sourcing a professional is a really key thing, right? And so a professional, let's just use the niche that we're in, a restaurant broker like Patrick and myself, we have really good background and knowledge of what some of the basic protective terms, language, and contingencies are to put in a purchase contract. We would obviously specify that towards the particular business or location you're targeting. One of the mistakes we see, though, is buyers or sellers trying to draft things on their own without representation or especially legal representation. So even us brokers, we can't act as a lawyer. So if things are too nuanced, too detailed, we also want to advise you, the buyer, to go say, this is above our pay grade. Please bring in a legal partner into this and see what they can help on. So advising you when we can help you and when we can't and try to connect you with the next party is very important. And I think a lot of buyers think they can do it on their own.
Yeah.
I did my first restaurant on my own. And man, it was a great experience for 12 years. But in hindsight, boy, did I make some mistakes on that lease and other things,
Yeah.
Yep.
I would also add as far as a do is have everything prepared, have all your financials ready, have a nice, resume and something that really shows all your experience, a brief plan. It doesn't have to be one of these 20-page plans that have the pro forma and all that stuff, but explain who you are, what your experience is, and what your plan is for, a business. And then don'ts right now, being timely, I'm seeing a lot of people using ChatGPT for their representation for an attorney. They're going and putting in due diligence and coming back to us with this massive list that is sometimes on point, and other times there's a bunch of other stuff in there because with ChatGPT, it can be a really fantastic tool, but you have to be very, very specific and you have to code it to tell you. So you're, it's tailoring it for this deal. And most people just put what are some due diligence items for a business? Well, of course, it's going to send you 100 things that might not be relevant for this particular deal.
Yeah. So, a dry cleaner is different than a restaurant business, right? You brought up a point previously, Patrick, that having your package, having your house in order as far as your background, your financials, your concept description, all those things, you just can't believe how many times someone says, I'm really willing to pull the trigger on this. I want to enter an LOI to the landlord to lease this place or buy this business. And we say, hey, we're engaged. Let's get this information to the seller. And it's not there. Well, how does that present to a seller or a landlord when there's no DBA, a one sentence description, the financial statement shows one or two things? It's just put the effort in because that will really pay off tenfold. Put the effort in. You'll stand out from the crowd.
And Drew, when they're asking for proof of funds, let's say the purchase price is $250,000. A lot of buyers will come to me and show $250,000. It's okay, I understand that you think this is about the purchase price, but it's about so much more, right? First of all, you have to have enough for the purchase price. Secondly, you got to have some working capital. There's, the security deposit, first month's rent. You're going to have to pay for your inventory. You're going to have enough money for your labor right off the bat. So you can need more than $250 just for the purchase. Then there's the landlord. Landlord wants to know that if everything goes bad, shit hits the fan, that you're going to be able to absorb that, for the first 6 months to a year. So the more money you show is better, especially for the landlord. They're not going to want to give a lease to somebody who's basically catching their tail constantly. So, take that very serious.
Drew, what other concerns really kind of that have you felt when you're like, I'm going to reach out to this business? This is interesting to me.
I mean, I think top of mind and top of concern is really how to determine value. And I'm thinking about that either based on revenue or profit. And, it's kind of funny because, well, there could be a lot of revenue, but there might not be a lot of profit. So how do you value the difference between the two?
Take it away, Patrick.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And first, I would say you should definitely, have a buyer representation for you from a broker like one of us that could help with that. But just for you when you're shopping businesses, there's two different methods of doing a valuation. There's, a going concern is what we call it. And that's basically doing a value on the profit. So if there's, $200,000 of profit, you use like a multiplier, and multipliers can go anywhere from, in this business, roughly 2 to 3.5 times profit, right? Depending on a lot of different factors, the lease, the location, how much revenue, how much profit, how much intellectual property or intangible and tangible assets. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And then there's kind of an asset in place method, which is basically either the name, menu, and concept are not included, but there's revenue there, or it's a second generation restaurant. And we do that based on, again, the lease and the location and how much revenue. And it's usually a percentage of the revenue that is how we come to that conclusion on that. So, I see it a lot of times. I'll have a, business with $3.5 million of revenue and no profit to show. Is there value there? I would argue that there is. I bought a business that had revenue and not a lot of profit. And, I went in there and I was able to double the profit, so, just because it's not profitable doesn't mean there's any goodwill, right? If there's $1 million of revenue walking through that door, that's better than zero.
Yeah.
How much of that can you retain? You know what I mean?
You've loved my term in the past, Patrick, my residual goodwill. There is residual goodwill on an asset sale, as long as they're not closed. Drew, one question directed back at you. And let me let the listeners know that in our interactions together, Drew, you are highly intelligent, well-spoken. You've done really well in your pizza business, and you're a reasonable human. So when you look at a business, you see a listing and you're like, this looks appealing. What has there ever been just slap you in the face red flags when you're reading a listing online, on any of the business sites?
Any of Andy's listings?
Yeah, let's not go there.
Yeah, it's funny because I think the red flag for me is the fact that maybe there haven't been any red flags. There hasn't been anything that's really like stopped me in my tracks. I kind of have, rose-colored glasses, and because I want this next step so badly, I'm probably not looking at things as critically as maybe I should. But that next first step for me is like trying to get some information, trying to, do the non-disclosure, going and buy and testing the restaurant, seeing what the location is, and then seeing what that feeling is like.
You're more visceral then. You need to get in that restaurant and see what your gut tells you.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. That's been the thing that's given me either, the green light or the red light. And I had two of those, there was a trip about the first of the year where there was two places that were out of market, meaning like they were like just farther away from where I would normally be thinking about. But I'm open to location as well, because what I really want to find is the best situation for me, and not necessarily someplace that's a block and a half away from my house, like my current situation. But one of those places I walked in and it kind of surprised me because I was expecting it to be more. But then I saw the fact that could be like a lot of upside. And then the other place I went into was in an area that I don't think could support the type of pizza that I want to make at the higher end of the market with higher prices. And their current operation was just completely the opposite of kind of like craft and artisan pizza. It was the place that they take a dough and smash it in a machine. So that gut instinct of just like, oh, I feel like this place has potential, and then there's going to be value added, or does it feel like a heavy lift and like I'm going to have to do everything? I'll tell you, the very first pizza place that I looked at was in an industrial complex by the LAX airport in El Segundo. And I think was this just after COVID? I think it was just after COVID. And I look in the window and man, there's this beautiful electric oven back here that, I'd been hearing about. The space looked pretty new, like less than maybe a couple years old. So it was like a gem. And then I took my wife back on a Saturday, and in this parking lot of 150 spaces, there was 2 cars on a Saturday afternoon at 1:00.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Right. So this office complex that had obviously deserted because of COVID, there wasn't anybody in those buildings anymore. If there are, it's during the week and not the weekend. Plus there was 10 other food businesses in that place. So, that feeling of like, oh, hey, this looks good. And then let's go back and do some more research. And then like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Big picture stuff there. Bigger, more macro observation of it rather than just looking in and seeing the equipment and such,
Yes.
Drew, do you have like somebody that you can like bounce things off that maybe won't be as emotionally invested as you are, so that they can look at it through the eyes of someone less connected to it? And sometimes that helps. Like I have somebody who like is just going to try and break it for me no matter what, and so that it gives you perspective. And then from there, you can decide whether or not those are deal breakers or not.
Yeah, I'd say that there's 2 people that come to mind. One is a real pizza guy, but I've since kind of realized that even though he's got a lot of experience in the pizza business, he doesn't have that same entrepreneurial spirit that's kind of required to go out on a limb like this. The other person is my wife. She's been on most of these first looks with me, and maybe even a second look. And, I talked to her about it. She has the restaurant experience. I feel like even though this is going to be my baby, it's going to be our kid, no matter how you look at it. Mm-hmm. So to have her both supportive of, what I'm trying to do is definitely, it's nice to talk to people about this, that can offer different perspectives, see things that you're not seeing.
Yeah, this is definitely off-camera talk, Drew, but El Segundo 10 years ago to now, good Lord, it has just absolutely changed. I used to live down there and went to Loyola, so when I go down there and I look at those neighborhoods and those restaurants down there, I'm like, this is a far cry from what it was in the early 2000s. Have you seen any red flags with listings, things like this, that really kind of raise your eyebrow? But what about when it comes to actually the listing agent or a seller? Some sellers are listing their business directly. That's not recommended, but they do on Facebook Marketplace and such. And obviously, if you personally reach out on a listing to an agent, has there been any uncomfortable exchanges when you reach out about a listing, Drew? Or anything that's kind of made you feel less than because you're a first-time buyer or inquiring?
I would say that in general, the reaching out that I've done personally, I'm kind of always surprised when people aren't like getting back to you at all.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the hiring market where, you invite someone to an interview and they don't show up. And the same thing with some listing agents, like, you're trying to get some information and
it helps, Drew.
And they're not providing it.
I sometimes reach out on behalf of my clients to listing agents, and I'm surprised by how I might not get any response back, or I might get a response back a week later. And I understand that they may not want to, cooperate with me, but I pride myself on getting back to my clients or even an agent, even if I don't want to work with them, as quickly as possible. Is it that hard?
The underlying tone of lack of cooperation amongst agents can really be a detriment. And the only party that hurts is the seller and the buyer, because he can't pursue. But it really just hurts the people that want to get a transaction done. So shame on those brokers. Yeah.
Yeah. Andy, I think you called on behalf of a listing that was down here. I had already reached out to them before, and then we made an acquaintance. So then I, tried to go through the proper channels and have you reach out versus having someone that's, represented by someone kind of doing the work on their own. But I don't know that you got a whole lot of information back from them. And then I followed up with them. And it's like, it was almost like, did they put the sign up just to get like buyer calls? Or
I was getting screened, and I'm like, yeah, it was. I know exactly what you're talking about. Have you encountered any listings where, information in a listing or not that seems inaccurate or misleading?
I won't say that I've seen it in the information that was presented, but as I did have one discussion with one agent, he told me a couple things that didn't turn out to pan out. Like, for instance, I said that I would personally prefer maybe some seller financing, so I don't have to put everything I got. And then the further we got along to it, it kind of, it was
evaporated,
like,
didn't it?
Yeah, it totally disappeared. And that's fine. I know things can change, and, not all the information is going to be completely fleshed out. You might have discussions with someone and say, hey, this might work. And by the time push comes to shove, it's like, it's not going to work. So
this is, and hence this is why the absolute importance on having a well-drafted purchase agreement and due diligence items clearly stated, so we can poke holes in things that don't seem accurate. Patrick, unfortunately, I've noticed once or twice recently with other brokers putting business SBA approvable as a very general term, but it's not SBA pre-approved.
Oh yeah, that's, it's all in the way that they word it, and you have to pay attention to all that stuff.
Sneaky, sneaky in my opinion. Yeah. Because the business, most have not been.
Yeah. Drew, when we were talking before we started here, you said you had put together some questions. Maybe it would be kind of interesting if you asked, me and Andy a couple questions directly from you, because I think it'll be really helpful for any buyers out there listening, because they probably feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to ask, what financials should be available from a seller? For instance, I got the taxes from one guy. I gave it to my bookkeeper, and he's like, this isn't really a good way to judge the business. And then I was like, well, yeah, don't people lie to the government? So
yeah, you want to cross-reference those by having multiple layers of financials, right? A lot of businesses, unfortunately, don't have good P&Ls created. A detailed P&L is a fantastic tool, in my opinion, but I need that to match with the company tax return. Sometimes quarterly sales tax reports are good just to cross-reference that the revenue they're listing is accurate and just accurate. And then, this may be more of a due diligence item once you're actually in contract, but digging into their POS directly and exporting reports from there is a useful tool to have. Sometimes you need to draw in payroll reports to double check labor and bookings like that. So there's a lot of different tools with the financial realm that we can pull in. Some of them can be in the initial stages of vetting a business before you make an offer. And then the more detailed ones typically come in the due diligence period after an offer is entered and accepted. You want to add to that at all, Patrick?
Yeah, I would add, I think all of what Andy said, cross-referencing and, quarterly sales tax returns and tax returns. I mean, do buyers or sellers want to add more revenue so they have to pay more sales tax? Like, I would think probably not. And then also, although the expenses may not, there may be like write-offs and all that stuff, the revenues should be fairly accurate, right? Like, people don't want to pay more tax than they have to. But I think one of the best snapshots of a business, which is going to give you the cash flow, is just looking right at their bank statements. Get like 1 year of statements, and you're really going to get like a sense of where the balance was at the beginning of the month and where the balance is at the end of the month. And, are they injecting money into the business to keep it afloat? Is it going negative? How much is it growing every month? Is the balance growing or is it subtracting? You know what I mean? And I think that gives you a really good snapshot of the cash flow of the business, which is much different than profit or, net income. And that's, I think, really important.
Cool. Should you write an offer on someplace you think is overvalued, or just wait for a price reduction?
I think that's twofold. If something's overpriced, you should probably, and you're really interested in it, then yeah, by all means, put an offer, but you're going to put an offer that the market will bear. And the seller may or may not be reasonable to come down to that. If you're hitting a wall, Drew, maybe you and I have kind of been through this with something where they're not necessarily, they're coming down to a certain extent, but they're stuck. And we still value it far below where that commonality is. And then I think you said it out. You said it very intelligently. You know what? Let's wait for that to come down. Because you're confident another buyer is going to look through the same lens that you have to date on that opportunity, and you don't think that business is going to sell quickly because the seller is not necessarily coming down in price or fully reasonable. So I think you already answered your own question on that because you've been through it.
Yeah. I think you can, like, a lot of people don't make offers on businesses that they feel are overpriced, and out of respect sometimes for the seller, they don't want to like come in very low, and that's I think that's a good idea, but you can always make an offer and just say, this is what I believe is the reasonable offer for this business. And, if they don't want to accept it, you say it's a standing offer for X amount of time, and they have, some time to think about it. Because sometimes when you come in there, within 2 to 4 weeks after the listing is gone live, the seller is probably not ready to take that low offer. But as they start getting further and further along from when they went live and they're not getting any activity, maybe then they're going to, start to reasonably think about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. This is kind of a landlord question. And the question is, do landlords care about our core costs? I've seen some places where it looks like the rent is like 10% or more, and all the practical advice says 6 to 8%. What do you do in that situation?
Boy. Yeah, you're in a rock and a hard place. Patrick said it. Walk away.
Walk away. Landlords. Yeah, go ahead.
If the lease has climbed over the term or the tenancy of the current seller or owner that is selling, and you're taking that over and starting at a rate, even though it's 10+% of the revenue, and you're not confident that you're going to be able to get it down to that 6 to 8%, you're going to have to walk away. I'd say 99 out of 100 landlords aren't just going to be like, you know what, I understand. And yeah, let's lower the rent substantially so you can succeed at 6 to 8%. It's just not going to happen. So the landlords, in many cases, we have fantastic landlords we deal with. We also have deal killers. So if there doesn't seem like there's much of a negotiation to be had, I think you're wasting your time.
Okay. So a lot of these questions have kind of been like almost pre-offer, pre-acceptance. Like, let's assume now that we've got a deal in place. Mm-hmm. Now I am going through some due diligence. You gave me some great points on the financials to be pulling. And then what type of inspections are we going to be doing? Am I going to be doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're going to want to do, if you can, a pre-change of ownership inspection, because you want to know what the health department thinks of that place. The seller could be in compliance. However, if it's been a while since the last time it sold or the last time it was when the build out was, the health department may require a new hand washing sink closer to where food is being prepared. It doesn't mean the seller is out of compliance, but they may require you as the buyer to do a bunch of new work that they want to have seen change in the business. The other thing that you want to do is inspect the equipment, the refrigerators, big ticket items like the compressor for the walk-in or the hood motor. Is that in good shape? And you want someone who, has an expertise in those. I would argue, depending on the building and the business, an electrical or plumbing inspection, and what they can do with the plumbing is they can send a camera down into the lines down below and just make sure there's no blockages, that the pipes are in good working order. They're not about to bust out of control and have a big, huge expense for you. Those are some, things that I think are important.
Yeah, good point on the plumbing. How's your plumbing, Patrick? Anyways, it's just a joke. I have a plumbing issue here. I literally had to build a restaurant in Sonoma that was built to the tune of $2.2 million. And in the first year, they didn't resolve a mainline plumbing issue, and the smell was coming up through the dining room, killed their business, and we sold it for literally pennies on the dollar.
Oh my
and it
God.
Was a sad, sad story. Yep. So get your plumbing checked, Patrick. Thank you.
I am 50, so.
Mm-hmm. Any more zingers for us, Drew?
Yeah, I literally think we've worked through my list. I think I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
One of my favorite questions to ask is, what questions should I be asking? Right? I don't know the questions to ask yet. You guys are in the business. You've probably worked with people that you know what you know, but I don't know what I don't know. So then are there questions that you can think of that I should be asking to get myself in a more comfortable position or get myself more along the lines of due diligence?
Yeah, I'll throw in a couple points and maybe Patrick can add on to it. The questions are really just related to transparency. The seller should be willing to open up the curtains a little bit and share their financials, whether it be their P&Ls, tax returns, or POS stuff. If they're not, red flag. You definitely need to be able to take a look at, their equipment list and lease as a whole. Anybody that's holding on too tight to things, I raise an eyebrow, right? So it's not too much of a mystery about, what to ask and what not to ask. You just want access.
Yeah, I would say sometimes it's not even about the question. It's about how they answer the question. Do I really think that, every buyer asked this question, why are you selling? And I don't, it's not a really important question to me, but sometimes sellers ramble on about some crazy thing. And it could have been just a really simple answer. And, and so you kind of want to see how they answer each question. Like Andy said, if you're asking for financials and that's kind of you're hitting a brick wall, why is it so hard? Where's the transparency, like Andy said? So I think it's just the questions are what's important to you, because, depending on what you're buying, if you're buying, like I said, a going concern, and you're buying a business that is fully operating and has profit, then you really want to know more about that business and what's pertinent to continuing that operation and making sure you don't mess that up. Whereas if you're buying a second generation restaurant, really the questions are to help you understand whether or not your operation is going to work there, not what they're doing, because what they're doing is probably not working. So you don't really care. You want to know what you're going to be doing there and have questions kind of related to that and to see if you can make that work for yourself.
And watch out for sellers that sell.
Yeah.
We're not buying on potential per se. So, if they're overselling, but they're not profitable or not running full hours of operation and things like this, but you should because it'll work for you. There's also a little bit of a red flag for me there.
Yeah.
Okay. That just made me think of obviously your agent is going to be spending the most time talking to either the other agent, so that aren't you guys essentially the ones that could be asking and fielding a lot of these questions?
100%. 100%. We want to hear every thought that comes out of your mind, our client, the buyer. We want you to filter us questions and concerns and thoughts. We can help hone those questions. We can be the lead of communication to get the answers back, to take some of the burden off of you. But you're right. We are the ones doing the lead in the communication if there is a buyer and seller broker involved.
All right. Just two more. Sorry. One, seller discretionary earnings. I've heard you guys talk about it before. When you've kind of said valuing and add backs, I'm not fully grasping that. I don't need to necessarily have that explained, but just I need more of a foundational, what are seller discretionary earnings and why are they important to me in the bottom line?
Yeah. Patrick can add on to this too, but there's a lot of personal expenses we see run through the business that would not necessarily pertain to you as the new owner or operator. We try to keep this as surface level. The lens that the SBA looks through for add backs, seller discretionary earnings, we're not just talking earnings before interest, tax, and amortization. We're talking about some of the personal expenses, auto expense, family health insurance, things like this that are acceptable to the SBA. They're acceptable to us also. We may have a little broader swath with what we can consider a valid add back between broker and client. However, if it just starts throwing in every little thing and groceries and all this stuff that are not related to the business, we try to filter that out and not include that as part of the value of the business. And we would most likely advise you on that if we see it being too excessive. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have just one more question. It's my bonus question, but I did want to, I wanted to throw
you just took my thunder. You just took my bonus question. No, I'm kidding.
I did want to throw a couple bones out to you guys as being, someone that's listened and learned, but also reached out to both of you. Patrick, when we spoke a while back about, valuing my business, you were very accessible and provided, a lot of good value for someone that, wasn't even potentially going to be able to be a client. So I appreciated that. Andy, two things for you. I've really leaned into you for advice and you have been a real expert. So to have you on my team gives me a lot of confidence moving forward. Second,
thank you.
Yes. Second, when it came time to kind of pump the brakes on that first deal we were doing, I really felt a genuine caring, understanding, and support for my decision. And I appreciate the fact that, I have an agent that's looking out for me genuinely and not just looking out for the closing. Those are my kudos to the boys.
We very much appreciate it. That means the world to us. We have walked in your shoes. We are ex-restaurateurs and we understand the struggle. So this is not about the commission. This is about making a deal that makes sense for all parties involved. Okay, this has got to be quick, Drew. What's your favorite kind of pizza to make? What is your favorite kind of pizza to eat? It could be the same thing. I don't know.
People used to ask me what my favorite pizza was. And my favorite pizza back in the day was Chovian cheese.
Wow.
And that's because I would never have to share it. And I wasn't a big sauce guy way back in the day. So literally a Chovian cheese was my deal. Nowadays, I'm probably more in the combo arena. Pepperoni, black olives, sausage, onion. That should do it.
There you go. Well, I guess no one was kissing you after your Chovian cheese pizza either, right? And they weren't. You didn't have to share though. My
favorite pizza, in case you're wondering, is cold pizza.
Ooh.
You're weird. You're fired. Just kidding.
Because that means that, got some leftovers in the morning to
There you go. I like it. All right. Redeemed. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Drew, for being on this. It was very insightful. We really appreciate your kudos to us, your support, and all of the insights that you brought today. I hope it is useful for other virgin buyers out there to hear this episode today. If anybody has any questions, you know where to reach us, email us, call us, and we will help where we can. So tune in next time. This is a 2-part series. So we will also have another qualified buyer on to ping some questions back and forth with Patrick and myself. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to worry about missing an episode, you can follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you found today's episode interesting or useful, please share it with someone you think would benefit and consider leaving a rating and review.
Reviews help restaurant owners or buyers just like you discover this podcast and benefit from the important topics covered in the episodes. Your opinion matters to us as a listener, so feel free to leave topic suggestions and feedback for us, as we will use these to tailor the episodes to you and help you get the most out of listening.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Restaurant Deal Making Exposed. If you're considering selling your business and would like a free consultation, reach out to Patrick and Andy at therestaurantsalesbroker.com or visit www.therestaurantsalesbroker.com to learn more.